Hello, my friend. Welcome to this slow English story. This story is simple. This story is in the past tense. You can listen. You can repeat. You can practice. Are you ready? Let us begin. Yesterday was Sunday. It was a quiet day. The sun was bright. The air was cool. I woke up early. I opened my eyes. I felt happy. I felt calm. I looked at the clock. It was 7 o'clock. I got up from the bed. I walked to the window. I opened the window. Fresh air came inside. The garden looked green. The flowers looked beautiful. The birds were singing. I brushed my teeth. I washed my face. I took a shower. The water was fresh. I felt clean. I wore my clothes. I wore a blue shirt. I wore black trousers. I wore comfortable shoes. I went to the kitchen. I was hungry. I made tea. I boiled water. I added tea leaves. I added sugar. I added milk. The tea was hot. I took bread. I toasted the bread. I spread butter. I ate slowly. I drank tea. The breakfast was simple. The breakfast was tasty. I checked my phone. There were 2 messages. One message was from my friend. The other message was from my sister. My friend said good morning. My sister said, call me when you are free. I smiled. After breakfast, I went outside. The weather was nice. The sky was blue. The air was fresh. I walked on the road. I saw many people. Some people were walking. Some people were running. Some people were cycling. I saw children. The children were playing. They were laughing. They were happy. I went to the park. The park was big. The grass was green. The flowers were colorful. The trees were tall. I sat on a bench. I looked around. I heard birds singing. I saw butterflies flying. I felt peaceful. A dog came near me. The dog was friendly. It wagged its tail. I touched the dog. The dog was happy. After some time, I stood up. I walked again. I enjoyed the walk. It was a nice morning. It was almost 12 o'clock. I walked back home. I entered the house. I washed my hands. I felt hungry again. I opened the fridge. There were some vegetables. There were some eggs. There was some rice. I cooked lunch. I cut the vegetables. I boiled rice. I fried eggs. I added salt. I added pepper. The food was simple. The food was tasty. I ate slowly. I drank water. I felt full. After lunch, I wanted to rest. I went to my room. I lay on the bed. I closed my eyes. I listened to soft music. I felt relaxed. I slept for 1 hour. I woke up after 1 hour. I felt fresh. I made coffee. The coffee was hot. I drank coffee. I sat at my desk. I opened my laptop. I checked my emails. There were many emails. I read the emails. I replied to some emails. I worked on my project. I wrote some notes. I made some plans. I felt focused. I worked for 2 hours. At 3 o'clock, I took a break. I walked to the balcony. I looked outside. The sky was still blue. The trees were moving in the wind. It was a calm afternoon. At 4 o'clock, my friend called me. He said, let us meet at the cafe. I said, okay, I will come. I wore my shoes. I took my bag. I walked to the cafe. The cafe was near my house. My friend was waiting. He smiled at me. I smiled at him. We sat at a table. We ordered coffee. We ordered snacks. We talked about our week. We talked about our families. We laughed many times. We enjoyed the time. After 1 hour, we finished. We said goodbye. I walked back home. The sun was going down. The sky was orange. The air was cooler. I went outside again. I walked slowly. I saw children playing. I saw old people walking. I saw young people running. The park looked different. The lights were on. The birds were going home. The air was soft. I sat on a bench. I closed my eyes. I listened to the sounds. I felt calm. I stood up again. I walked home. I entered the house. I washed my face. I drank water. I sat on the sofa. I took my phone. I watched some videos. I read some news. I called my sister. She answered quickly. She said, "Hello?" I said, "Hello." We talked for 15 minutes. She told me about her studies. I told her about my day. She laughed. I laughed. We felt happy. We said goodbye. I kept the phone on the table. It was evening. The sky was dark. The moon was bright. The stars were clear. I looked outside the window. The world looked beautiful. I felt a little hungry again. I went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge. I saw some vegetables. I saw some rice. I saw some chicken. I decided to cook dinner. I cut the vegetables. I washed the chicken. I boiled rice. I fried some curry. The smell was nice. The food was ready. I placed the food on the table. I sat down. I ate slowly. The food was hot. The food was tasty. I drank water. I felt full. I cleaned the table. I washed the dishes. I dried the dishes. I kept them in the cupboard. The kitchen was clean. I walked to the living room. I sat on the sofa. I turned on the television. I watched the news. The news was about the world. The news was about the city. The news was about people. I listened carefully. After 20 minutes, I turned off the television. I wanted to read. I took a book. I opened the book. The story was interesting. I read 1 chapter. I read 2 chapters. I felt happy. I closed the book. I kept it on the table. I stood up. I stretched my body. I drank some water. I walked to the balcony. The air was cool. The moon was bright. The stars were shining. The street was quiet. A few people were walking. Some children were playing. Some dogs were barking. I looked at the trees. The trees were moving slowly. The night was peaceful. I stood there for some time. I thought about my life. I thought about my dreams. I thought about my family. I felt thankful. I went back inside. I checked my phone. There were some messages. One message was from my friend. He said, "Good night." Another message was from my cousin. He asked about my health. I replied with thanks. I kept the phone on the table. I sat on the sofa again. I listened to music. The music was soft. The music was slow. I closed my eyes. I enjoyed the music. I felt relaxed. I felt sleepy, but I wanted to write. I opened my notebook. I took a pen. I wrote about my day. I wrote about the morning. I wrote about the afternoon. I wrote about the evening. I wrote about my feelings. I wrote about my thoughts. The words came slowly. I wrote 1 page. I wrote 2 pages. I felt happy. I closed the notebook. I kept it on the table. I stood up. I went to the kitchen. I made tea. The tea was hot. I drank slowly. The tea was good. I washed the cup. I switched off the kitchen light. I walked back to the living room. I looked at the clock. It was 9 o'clock. I thought about watching a movie. I took the remote. I turned on the television. I searched for a movie. I found a simple movie. I started the movie. The movie was about a boy. The movie was about his dreams. The boy worked hard. The boy faced problems. The boy never gave up. The movie was inspiring. I watched carefully. I laughed many times. I felt emotional. I felt motivated. The movie finished after 2 hours. I turned off the television. I looked at the clock. It was 11 o'clock. I felt sleepy. I stood up. I walked to the bathroom. I brushed my teeth. I washed my face. I washed my hands. I felt clean. I walked to my bedroom. I saw my bed. The bed was soft. The pillow was white. The blanket was warm. I switched off the light. I lay on the bed. I closed my eyes. I thought about the day. I felt thankful for the day. I felt happy for the day. Slowly, I slept. The night was calm. The house was quiet. The stars were shining outside. The moon was bright in the sky. I slept peacefully. The next day came. It was Monday. The alarm rang. I opened my eyes. I looked at the clock.